everyone, my name is Hana Sundari. You are watching Tutorial TV Sociolinguistics and Language Teaching from Universitas Terbuka. Today, I'm going to discuss about communicative competence and its implications in language teaching. These presentations will be divided into 3 sections. There will be introductions, models of communicative competence, and the implications. Now, I'd like to move on to introductions. The term communicative competence was firstly initiated by Dale Hames as reactions to Chomsky's linguistic view of competence. Competence, according to Chomsky, refers to the linguistic system that an ideal native speaker of a given language that has internalized and is associated exclusively with language of rules of grammar. Meanwhile, performance is the actual use of language in concrete situations. However, this competence-performance distinctions has no room for considerations of appropriacy of language use in social contexts. Thus, a sociolinguist, Dale Hames, used the term communicative competence to express his ideas of speech community and the integrations between language, communications, and culture. According to Cannell and Swain, communicative competence refers to a synthesis of an underlying system of knowledge and skill for communications with 3 types of knowledge. The first, knowledge to underlying grammatical principle. The second, knowledge to know how to use the language in social context. And the third, knowledge to combine utterances and communicative functions with respect to discourse principles. Meanwhile, Savignon defined communicative competence as the ability to function a truly communication setting in a dynamic exchanges in which linguistic competence must adapt to local informational input. Communicative competence is dynamic, interpersonal, relative, and defined by context. Competence itself can be observed, developed, maintained, and evaluated only through performance. In Hames' definitions, communicative competence is the level of language learning that enables language users to convey their messages to others and to understand others' messages within specific contexts. In the other words, communicative competence includes not only knowledge of language forms, but also knowledge of form, function, relationship learned from the abundantness of all language use in social life. Hames viewed that communicative competence is interactions of grammatical, psycholinguistic, socio-cultural, and probabilistic systems of competence. In a very simple expressions, the competence language user is someone who knows where, when, and how to use language appropriately, rather than only knowing how to produce accurate grammatical expression. In a simple expressions, Gompers compares the 2 competences. Linguistic competence includes the speaker's ability to produce grammatically correct sentences. Communicative competence refers to ability to select from the totally grammatical correct expressions. Meanwhile, to him, forms which appropriately reflect the social norms governing behavior in specific encounters. During in 1970s and 1980s, applied linguists and language theorists gave more attention to the development concept of communicative competence in the line with the increasing wave of communicative approach. Hames constructed the models of communicative competence, then it was extended by Cannell and Swain. Bachmann modeled communicative language ability or CLA, and then the model was extended by Selce-Murcia, Journey, and Terrell. Now, I would like to look at models of communicative competence. The first, Hames model. Hampson's models of communicative competence brought sociolinguistic perspective with the assumptions of theories of language and its use in social context. Hames proposed the theory of competence as a rejection of Chomsky's concept of competence that includes the language user's knowledge and rules of language in context. The knowledge and ability are two: whether and to what degree something is formally possible, whether and to what degree something is feasible in virtue of the means of implementations available, whether and to what degree something is appropriate in relation to a context in which it is used and evaluated, whether and to what degree something is in fact done, actually performed, and what is doing entails. Hames considered that communicative competence is an interaction of grammar, psycholinguistic, sociolingual, and probabilistic system of competence. Let's pay attention on the examples below. The first is ungrammatical utterance dealing with a particular grammar. The second is unacceptable or awkward dealing with a particular perceptual strategy. Say goodbye to greet someone is inappropriate in a particular social context. The second model is Cannell and Swain's model. As the extensions of Hampson's model, Cannell and Swain constructed model of communicative competence. At the initial stage in 1980, communicative competence contains three main components: grammatical competence, sociolinguistic competence, and strategic competence. Cannell alone then added the framework with one more component, discourse competence. The first, grammatical competence. It is the ability to use the language correctly, how well a person has learned features and rules of the language. This includes vocabulary, pronunciation, and sentence formations. It is the domain of grammatical and lexical capacity. This competence refers to knowledge of lexical items and rules of morphology, syntax, sentence grammar semantics, and phonology. The second, sociolinguistic competence. This type of competence consists of two sets of rules. The first, socio-cultural use of rules and rules of discourse. It is related to the ways in which utterances are produced and understood appropriately. In the other words, in which certain propositions and communicative functions are appropriate within a given socio-cultural context, such as topic, role of participant, setting, norms of interactions. Sociolinguistic competence refers to the ability to use language correctly in a specific social situations. For example, proper language forms at the job interview. The third, discourse competence. It refers to the ability to use new language in spoken and written discourse, how well a person can combine grammatical forms and meaning to find different ways to speak and write. Cannell wrote that it is as mastery of rules that determine ways in which forms and meaning are combined to achieve a meaningful unity of spoken or written text. Fourth, strategic competence. Strategic competence refers to strategies for effective communications when learner's vocabulary proves inadequate for the job, and his command of useful learning strategies. It is how well a person uses both verbal forms and nonverbal communications to compensate for lack of knowledge. It is the coping strategies that communicators employ to initiate, terminate, maintain, repair, and redirect communications. The third model is Bachman and Palmer. Bachman suggested a new comprehensive model of communicative competence, the model of communicative language ability, or CLA. It comprises three aspects: language knowledge, strategic knowledge, and psychological mechanisms. Then Bachman and Palmer proposed a model of language competence in which introduced affective factors as major step. The last, Murcia, Journey, and Terrell's model. With more view to discourse competence, Celse Murcia, Dorney, and Terrell presented a model of communicative competence which is not a hierarchical system of discrete competence or ability, but dynamic, interactive construct. The model comprises of 5 components: discourse competence, linguistic competence, actional competence, socio-cultural competence, and strategic competence. Discourse competence is the ability to interpret a series of sentences and a larger context of how suffice to construct longer stretches of language so that the parts make up a coherent whole. Linguistic competence refers to the mastery of linguistic code, the ability to use grammar, syntax, and vocabulary of a language. Actional competence can be defined as the ability to choose speech act or knowledge of language functions, such as expressing and finding out feelings, asking for and giving information, complaining, greeting and leaving, and knowledge of speech act sets. Socio-cultural competence is an understanding of social context in which communications takes place, including the role relationships, shared informations of the participant, and the communicative purposes. Strategic competence refers to know how sufficient to recognize and to fix communications breakdowns, how sufficient to learn more about the language in context. It is a competence underlying the ability to make repairs, to cope with imperfect knowledge, and to sustain communication through approximation, paraphrase, circumlocutions, repetition, hesitations, avoidance, and asking for help. Now, I would like to turn to implications of communicative competence in language teaching. Along with the acceptance of communicative language teaching and the concept of communicative competence as its goal of teaching language, some implications may be unavoidable for language teacher in applications level of communicative principles. Cannell and Swains has illustrated the implications for a communicative approach to teaching after proposing their theoretical framework of communicative competence. The first, syllabus design, introduced a functional organized syllabus based on communicative functions. 2. Teaching methodology. Communicative activities are as classroom activities. Third, teacher training. The role of teacher is as participant to build meaningful communications and to succeed the communicative purposes. 4. Material development. The textbooks is based on principles of communicative approach. And 5. Assessment. Providing tasks for actual communicative competence, such as integrative tasks, rather than discrete point to test grammatical accuracy. However, in context of foreign language teaching, the applications of communicative competence and communicative approach in general find some challenges. Just like what is written, changing from traditional method into more communicative practices in language classroom is not about understanding in theories, but a reform of goals, classroom practices, material, and assessment. It is also added that language teachers need to experience and practice ways of integrating communicative experiences into their classroom. It is sum up some research of how this concept implemented in the classroom level. The first, language teachers find difficulty in choosing what skill to be taught and choosing effective method. The second, teachers have distinct views about this concept. The third, foreign language context, the terms communications is not quite clear. 4. EFL teaches low proficiency level is as impediments for implementing communications method. 5. Complexity for achieving communicative competence sounds unrealistic goal for non-native speakers. Thus, the terms of concept of intercultural communicative competence comes into discussions to facilitate language programs in foreign context which have different goals, values, norms, and values of appropriateness. Well, that's about it for now. We have talked about communicative competence and the implications for language teaching. See you again on the next sessions and thank you for watching.